Hi, welcome to the History of D&D Weekly. I'm your host, DM Gallibond. Hey everybody, today is June 13th, 2020, and on this week's History of D&D Weekly, we are going to take a look at the Cleric class in original D&D. For those of you who did not catch the first video in this series is a preparation for a reboot of my History of D&D campaign, where the idea is to play through a full campaign using every rule set of D&D and building the history of a homebrew game world as we go. So we start with a campaign based on the original rule set. That kind of gives us the foundation and ancient history of the world, and then we'll come back a few thousand years after that with the first edition rules, and then the second edition, and the third edition, and so on and so on. And every campaign we play through, events will become part of the history, characters will become heroes and legends, myths will be created from the stories that are told in the previous games. So that's the idea for this campaign. It's a bit ambitious, and the reason I'm doing this series is because when I first started it, there were a lot of people that thought they wanted to play original edition D&D, and then when they really saw how different the rule set is, they decided, oh, okay, I don't think I want to play that really, and they kind of flaked out. So this way, there's going to be a whole series of videos for prospective players to review, and they will be quizzed on it. So I'll have to know that they've actually either they'll have to know the rules of the original set coming in, or they can use these videos to find, the important rules and everything. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Cleric. Highlights of the Cleric in original D&D. In this edition, only humans can be clerics. So fighters, thieves, which would later become rogues, magic users, which would later become wizards, and clerics, only humans are allowed to play those classes in this edition. There are demi-human classes, and we'll get to those in a few weeks. Clerics do not get any spells until level 2. So they start off, they can wear armor, they can use shields, they can use any weapon except for edged and pointed weapons. So that means that they can use like maybe a quarter of the weapons everybody else can. And they don't get any spells until level 2, but they can turn undead at level 1. They can climb all the way up to level 36. And a cleric who has a neutral alignment may change their class to a druid at level 9. We'll talk about that a little bit later when we discuss the druid class. And in this edition, there are 1st through 7th level divine spells. Now, if you're familiar with 5th edition, you know that as clerics, you can cast 1st through 9th level divine spells. 8th and 9th level divine spells haven't been invented yet in this edition. So the divine spells only go up through level 7. Clerics can use any armor and shield. Like we said, they cannot use edged or pointed weapons. Now, another change is the hit dice. Clerics use D6 hit dice in this edition, so they gain 1d6 hit points per level up through level 9. And then clerics gain only 1 hit point per level starting at level 10. Now, just like in other editions, level 1 through 9, if you have a Constitution bonus, you can add that to your hit dice at every level. But starting at level 10, doesn't matter what your Constitution bonus is. You just get 1 hit point every level. So that's a thing in this edition. Yeah, big culture shock for people that are used to later editions of the game. All right, we talked a little bit about some of these class quirks. Like I said, they cannot cast spells at level 1, but they can turn undead at level 1. And adventuring clerics make a choice to be landowners or travelers at level 9. Landowning clerics will build a stronghold, and they will become the primary church authority in the lands that they hold. So, the kind of like, I guess, in modern church hierarchy, they would kind of be like a bishop or a maybe a cardinal or something like that, where they are over a group of other churches or um, other parishes or whatever. And landowning clerics can rise higher in the ranks of their religion. However, uh, because of that higher rank, they are responsible for the spiritual well-being of the people who live in their lands. So they are always somewhat tied to their land. Once they build a stronghold and become a landowner, they have that gravitational pull back to that stronghold and responsibilities that may call them back there and keep them just from being able to adventure like they did previously. Now, adventuring clerics do not have as much responsibility to the church, and they're often sent on dangerous missions by church superiors, often landowning clerics that have more church authority but are far weaker in terms of levels of spellcasting ability. And so, adventuring clerics are kind of capped out at how far they can rise in church hierarchy because they are, you know, they're not around to go to all the meetings and participate in all of the theological discussions. They're off, you know, slaying monsters and, you know, helping their friends gain treasure and keeping the party alive. Whereas the real work of the church is done, in prayer, contemplation, meditation, and over cups of wine in meeting rooms. So, all right, let's take a look at the Rule Cyclopedia, which is the resource we mentioned last week that we are using for this particular game. So, clerics. Here we go. So our prime requisite is wisdom. So you want to have a high wisdom for a cleric. And if you have a wisdom score of 13 to 15, you'll gain a 5% bonus on your experience. And if you have a wisdom of 16 to 18, you get a 10% bonus. We talked about the hit dice, maximum level, armor, weapons, and special abilities as turning undead. Okay, and you'll see here the cleric is a human character dedicated to serving a great and worthy cause. So doesn't really require you to follow a deity. Now, for the sake of familiarity and for the sake of my sanity and not having to go and invent a whole pantheon, I am just using one of the longest standing and oldest standing pantheons in D&D, and that is the Greyhawk pantheon. D&D is a multiverse. I figure that deities probably are venerated on more than one plane. So the deities that are venerated in Greyhawk they're venerated in my game world as well, even though my game world is not the world of Greyhawk. So there we go. Um, all clerics belong to orders or clerical societies, and then clerics can learn to cast spells after gaining at least second level of experience. And now we have the experience table, and you'll see this goes all the way up to level 36. And indeed, there's no spells at all at first level. And now I want you to look at something here. You'll see that the experience table goes 1500, 3000, 6000. So it doubles here, doubles here, doubles here. Oh, then 5th to 6th, you have to go from 12 to 25,000. Okay, then you go to 50,000, then 100. And so those double until 9th level at 200,000. And then it goes up by 100,000 from then on. So yeah, um, big jumps of experience, and yes, you have to have nearly 3 million experience points to be a 36 level cleric. But notice that you get a ton of spell slots as you go. By the time you do reach that 36 level, you have 9 spells at every level up through level 7. So 9 times 7, so you have 63 spell slots every day that you can use. So pretty good for, uh, pretty generous in terms of the spell casting capability. Now, also we have the saving throws. And saving throws are a little bit different. You notice saving throws are not tied to ability scores in this edition. They are tied to the type of thing you're actually saving against. So, death rays or poison. And you'll see here, this top row is the level range. So, your saving throws stay the same, levels 1 through 4, and then 5 through 8, then 9 through 12, 13 through 16, so on and so on and so forth. So, Death Ray or Poison, Magic Wands is its own saving throw. Paralysis or Turn to Stone, so like the gaze of a basilisk or a Medusa or something. Petrification. Dragon Breath has a separate saving throw all on its own, and usually it is a little bit higher in this edition. Interesting thing also in this edition is about the Dragon's Breath. When a dragon breathes, the DM does not roll any hit die or any dice to determine how many hit points the breath weapon does. The DM simply looks at the current hit points of the dragon. And so the dragon deals as much damage with its breath weapon to everything it hits as it has hit points. So if the dragon has 100 hit points, it breathes, it deals 100 hit points of damage to everything that it touches. So dragons are extremely deadly in this edition of the game. They are incredibly powerful, and if you are a low-level character, if you get any whiff of a dragon, the only thing you want to do is run, because all that thing has to do is breathe in your direction, and you could be dead 10 times over. Um, you know, I don't care how well you save. Even if you make your save and throw, you're not going to survive, um, 3 or 4 times your damage in hit points. And then finally, rod, staffs, or spells. So it's interesting here that wands gets 1 saving throw, and then rods and staves get a second saving throw, and that spells is lumped in with the rod and staff saving throw. So, just interesting. Clerics have good fighting skills and can fight monsters, can wear any type of armor, many types of weapons, but cannot use edge or piercing weapons of any kind. And then your party has enough fighters. Your cleric should not need to fight often. Equipped for fighting. Okay. Then class details. Prime requisite requires wisdom. Hit dice, armor and weapons, and then special abilities. Turning undead has the power to force certain undead or certain monsters called undead to run away or even perish. And this ability is called turning undead. So explanation of results. Now there's a big table down here. So skeleton, first level cleric, rolls 2d6. 2d6 to determine if they turn undead or not. And they have to match or exceed this number in order to turn the undead. So, first level cleric can look at a skeleton and roll 2d6. And if it gets a 7 or higher, that skeleton is going to run away. Gets a 9 or higher against a zombie, the zombie will run away. An 11 or higher against a ghoul, the ghoul will run away. But all of these other ones, wights, wraiths, mummies, specters, vampires, etc., 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 it cannot even attempt to turn them because those undead are too powerful. Now, as you go up in level, you'll eventually see sometimes those numbers turn to a T. T means automatically turns. So a skeleton is automatically turned by a cleric of second level. Skeletons and zombies are automatically turned by a third level cleric. Now you get up to fourth level and you start to see something called a D, which is automatically destroy. Oh, and I should say these T's. That means you automatically turn 2d6 hit dice of undead. And in this edition, skeletons are one hit die monsters. So that means you roll 2d6, it's that many skeletons that run away. Zombies, on the other hand, are 2 hit die monsters. So you roll 2d6, take half of the result, and that's how many zombies are turned and forced to run away. Then you start to see some that are D. And D means you automatically destroy 2D hit dice worth of undead of that kind. Then the D plus means that you automatically destroy 3d6 hit dice of that kind. So by the time you get to be 11th level, you don't just destroy 2d6 hit dice of skeletons, you destroy 3d6. That means they don't even get a chance to run away. They just explode into shards of bone or whatever. And then the D pound or D hash is automatically destroy 4d6 hit dice of that type of undead. And notice that by the time you get to level 25, a cleric can automatically turn any kind of undead in the game. So, and in original D&D, this is kind of the power curve of the undead, which is a little bit different than what we think of in later editions. So it goes skeletons are the weakest, then zombies, then ghouls, then wights, then wraiths, then mummies, then specters, then vampires, then phantoms, then haunts, then spirits, then nightshades, liches, and then above liches, they're special. So, liches are kind of the top of the food chain in undead in most editions of the game. Skeletons are the bottom of the barrel, weakest of the undead in this edition, and they're generally among the weaker undead that you run into in most editions, but not always. All right. So then, explanation of all this stuff, and then higher experience level. Now, there's a weird rule that they came to, and at first I thought it was a misprint in the book, but every single class does the same silly thing. At 9th level, you achieve name level. Okay, and it's even more bizarro than that because at let's see, because at lower levels in this lower levels in this edition, you can actually let's see, what do we want to do? We want to do the basic set DM's rulebook. Open with Google Chrome. Okay, so you'll actually see that there are titles that the classes get at different levels. So, where is the do 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 do? Okay, so da, 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 da. Okay. Oh, I think I maybe opened the wrong one. I think I should have opened the player's manual. Okay. Oh, that's not what it is. I want to open with Google Chrome. Okay, there we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then let's take a look at the. Okay. Dungeons and Dragons characters. Okay. So. Yes. Yes, okay. So, here we go. Clerics. At every level, they gain a title. So, level 1, your cleric is an acolyte. Level 2, they're an adept. Level 3, they're a priest or priestess. And then this edition, original edition, is sometimes called the BECMI or the BECMI edition, which stands for Basic, Expert, Companion, Master, and Immortal. And so there's different tiers of play. There's 5 different tiers of play that run all the way from level 1 up through level 36 and beyond. Immortal is 36 and beyond. So, and every level you get a title. But at 9th level, you have what is considered a name level. And you are called a patriarch if the cleric is male, or a matriarch if the cleric is female. And then there's also a decision tree or a decision point at 9th level. If the cleric is neutral, they can become a druid instead. And we will take a look at the druid class in a later episode of this. The other thing they need to determine is whether to be a landowner or a traveling cleric. And a landowner can choose to build a stronghold at 9th level. Can progress up through the ranks of the clerical order. Character may receive financial aid from order towards building of stronghold, yada yada yada. Disadvantages. Character will be the chief clerical authority for his order for the lands around his stronghold. Means that he has responsibilities to the people, so he's got that gravitational pull we talked about. Always keeping him, needing to be mindful of what needs to be done there. Cleric who decides not to build a stronghold, sanctioned by his orders, referred to as a traveling cleric. And he doesn't have to tie himself to any one place or group of people except when acting on official requests from his order. He can go wherever he pleases, but he may not rise above the rank of any land-owning clerics, and he may not achieve much political influence within his order. So, becoming a landowner, there's a whole procedure about what the cleric has to do. how much money they have to raise, and then eh, they envision almost a transaction between the player and the DM, like almost like the player is applying for building permits, has to tell the DM kind of what the design of their stronghold is going to be and what they want on it, and then the DM has to figure out how much all that costs, and then the player has to decide if they can afford it, and if they can't afford everything they want, are they going to start by building a smaller one and then add on as they go, all this kind of stuff. And then traveling clerics, they just keep adventuring basically. And then there is a warning to the dungeon master that you should not allow your player to switch back and forth between a traveling cleric and a landowning cleric, because that's very disruptive to the clerical order. It's like, okay, it's our game. We can kind of do what we want. But, I always like looking at this through the lens of what did the developers of the game intend for this to be. Now, with some of these, you can, if you extrapolate a little bit, you can really see the influence of the miniature war games hobby that spawned D&D in this, because you imagine like um, one of the hallmarks of these historical reenactment games, especially when you go back to the medieval and the ancient Greek and Roman things, is that there was always some authority, like um, the king or the baron or the duke or the count, that would be able to pull these armies together and deploy them out for these battles. And so they kind of look at D&D as, well, your character that you are going to be raising through these levels, well, one of the things you obviously would want to do is you'd want to start accruing political power for your character. Now, some players may not care about that. Some players may just want to go kill monsters. Uh, and and it's like, well, if you do want it, you have to learn there's a trade-off. To do this, well, whatever. They It starts to cross the line between getting a little more historic and trying to stay a little bit fantastical, and I think that's just a decision that every gaming group has to make. Uh, you know, um, they the cleric, uh, as far as I'm concerned, if a cleric wants to travel and wants to kind of also have sort of the benefits of being a landowning cleric, well, they can always uh, get one of their followers who is a cleric to basically, you know, be the person who sits at the keep and makes the decisions. But if any real big decisions come up, oh, well, of course they're always going to reach out through some sort of magical spells and ask the adventuring cleric, the PC cleric, hey, what should we do? There's this big decision when we need to decide either we're doing this or we're doing that. What do you want, boss? And so they can kind of have their cake and eat it too. As far as I'm concerned, I don't see any reason why a a powerful magic using cleric wouldn't be able to do that if he were part of an established adventuring group. So that is pretty much it for the cleric. Next week we will look at the fighter, and we will go week by week looking at all of these classes. All right, everybody. That is going to do it for me for this week. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this. If you did, please go subscribe to the channel with the subscribe button down below. And if you click the little notification bell, then you'll get an alert every time we put a new video up on the channel. All right. Thank you, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this. We will talk to you next week. I've been DM Gallibond. Peace out.